Anybody know better?
There we go.
There we go. Got it.
Thank you. So right now in our state legislature, there's an attack on abortion rights, a very serious attack on abortion rights. There is, as we know, plenty of attacks on voting rights from all different angles. I mean, you know, all the years I've worked trying to get out the vote and getting PEVL, they're trying to get rid of, if you don't know what PEVL is, the permanent early voting list, they're trying to get rid of that. And the right to public education, even the right to a solid education for our children is being attacked. So I think we quite often as indivisibles look at the national scene, right? And we look at the president and the Congress and all that, and that's upsetting enough. But we, you know, state and local politics directly affect our lives really quite a lot. And the bills being proposed and passed are kind of difficult to understand sometimes. And we don't feel we have an influence as citizens. And that is a big problem. So two superstars of state politics who know that we do and can have an influence are here to explain us today what we can do. We have a system in Arizona where we can actually speak to our legislatures, and that doesn't happen in every state, that's for sure. So I want to introduce them with really so much pleasure and gratitude that they came on to this tonight, because I know the two of you, Melinda and Cathy, are so busy. It's Cathy Sigmon and Melinda Iyer. Melinda is a founding editor of the Arizona Legislature Update Report. That's also called the Iyer Report. You probably get it in the mail. If you don't, you can sign up for it. I just signed up for it today because I always get it from all my friends. But I thought, let's just get it myself. It keeps track of the legislative actions in the State House. With 30 years of writing and managing editorial content, Melinda has developed a knack for distilling complex legislation into meaningful language for the rest of us. And that is so important. If you read these bills, it's very easy to give up on them because you're just like, what are they even talking about? So Melinda knows how to distill it for us. So just to get the gist of what the bills are about. Cathy is a co-founder of two organizations, Save Our Schools, AZ, and also Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. I think Civic Engagement Beyond Voting is an indivisible group, but Cathy can tell us that. And her roots are very deep in Arizona, and she's got a background in business, and she's really leading these organizations. And I mean, she and I met, I think, 4 years ago in Washington, DC at the Nationally Coordinated Network Conference. So she's been working a long time, really hard. And I'm just so honored and grateful to introduce them. So Cathy and Melinda, you're on, you go.
Okay, well, I'm going to kick it off, and thank you so much, Rosemary. I vividly remember that that event in Washington, which was the first and so far the only National Indivisible conference. It made a huge impression on me, and there were a small group of us. We really bonded very tight when we were there. It was just great. So what we're going to do, Melinda and I will tag team. I am going to start, and I'm going to go through a presentation, and I will try to whip through it as quickly as possible so that Melinda, who is truly, the one you are waiting to hear from, so that Melinda can talk about what's going on right now. So I know there's time for Q&A at the end. If you have any burning questions, put them in the chat and maybe somebody can flag them for me. But what I'm going to do is share my screen. Wait a minute. There we go. And okay, is that all right? Are you seeing my screen?
It's great, Cathy.
Okay, great. So we are Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. And we organized around the request to speak system at the Arizona State Legislature. The Arizona Constitution not only suggests that we be involved in our state government, it actually requires us to. It says, all political power is inherent in the people, and that is us. And we take that very seriously, and I know you do too. Just like voting, request to speak is something that works best when a lot of people use it, because it is a sort of a mass response tool. And the more people that use it, the more impactful it is. So just for a little stroll through civic engagement history, we formed in 2017. We organized around the request to speak system at the Arizona State Legislature. We were just a small group of women. We didn't know each other, but we met at the Women's March. There was also a DNC. They were trying to get their leadership together, and there were various rallies and meetings, and we kept running into each other and learned about the request to speak system and learned that we could start signing people up. Melinda, in the meantime, had started realizing that if she needed to use request to speak, she would have to be organized. She started researching the bills and putting them together in pretty much the same format that she has today, and started sharing that. And that is now her Legislature Weekly, which is used by thousands of people around Arizona today. By 2019, we realized we really needed to train people. Sorry, my dog wants to be here for this. We needed to train people to use the request to speak system. It is not necessarily intuitive. So we started recruiting trainers, and we started going to groups and introducing people to all the steps necessary. Then in 2020, we expanded beyond the legislature, and, just like you, we were good and tired of playing defense. So we started looking ahead to the 2020 elections, and we organized phone banking and suggested that people who were in solid red or solid blue districts could phone bank on behalf of candidates in some of the swingable districts. So we expanded our pool, and we just had a blast. We played phone bank bingo, and we gave each other all kinds of encouragement, and we would get together once a week, and every week we phone banked on behalf of a different candidate. So in 2021, after the election, that was when by then the pandemic was pretty entrenched, and we realized the legislature was not going to get back to in person. So we started hosting our Sunday afternoon happy hours, and those have become just, a fabulous opportunity to look at get what's going on at the legislature directly from Melinda, and also from a guest legislator. We also started training people to write letters to the editor, and we also started up some accountability teams to start undermining some of the really bad legislators who we have to deal with all the time. We call it name and shame. And basically, we know that people don't necessarily connect their own legislators. In many cases, they don't even know who they are, but they don't necessarily connect them to the bad policies and the extreme policies that they are promoting down at the legislature. So because I was playing with graphics today, I wanted to show, we started with RTS. We graduated to phone calling, emails. We started writing letters to the editor. And this year, our big project is testimony, but all of these things are really one thing that we are doing. And that is this.
Yeah.
We need a new legislature. We are doing our best with the one we've got, but all of our work this year is on behalf of changing the legislature in as many ways as we can. So just a very quick run through of what Request to Speak is. Hopefully you all have accounts and are using it regularly, even though it's a horrible system this year. It's incredibly slow. It allows you to register your thumbs up or thumbs down for bills. It was a system that was created for lobbyists to use. So we know that when it's bad for us, it's also bad for them. So I do believe they are working on getting the system expedited. It's been very slow this year. It looks just like this over here on the right. And it says, do you wish to speak? You would click no, unless you intend to be in that committee where the bill is being heard, actually speaking on behalf or in opposition to a bill. But so lobbyists, as I said, they are using the Request to Speak system, and they are going down to the legislature and they are speaking. But now they're not alone, because we have essentially hijacked this system. Also extremely meaningful to groups outside of the Phoenix area like Prescott. This is a way to engage and empower rural communities and to introduce them to what's going on in the legislature, so that people all over the state can enter their Request to Speak, can follow the legislature, and we try to make it as easy as possible for them. So building rural power is very, very important to civic engagement beyond voting. So who represents me at the Arizona legislature? You probably already know this, but there are 30 legislative districts. You have 2 representatives, 1 senator, and you can go to azredistricting.org/district locator, just enter your address and see what district you're in. So what about redistricting? Well, this was dated January 21st. So that was when the final legislative and congressional maps were certified for the next decade. Indivisible followed the redistricting process. We had a fabulous group led by Deb Howard, who organized people around all the meetings and testifying and just doing a huge amount of work around redistricting. So really the legislative maps are not quite as bad as they could have been. You can also go to this site. It is Data Orbital, and you can look at either congressional district or legislative district and see which way the data tells you that district is going to swing. It's actually pretty interesting. So this is the legislature's homepage. Hopefully you've already been there. You can go to either the Senate or the House drop down and see who all the members are, their phone numbers, their email addresses. And as a pro tip, what I recommend you do, if you don't already have your legislators in your phone, to add them to your phone and use a keyword, something like rep or something like that. So all you have to do is remember rep, and you can search in your phone and all your legislators will pop up and you can call them. I show this graph. It's a very popular page. It looks like it's very complicated, and in fact, passing a bill is 10 times more complicated than it looks here. But I really only show this to point out that the RTS window is only when a bill is on a committee agenda for the coming week and the committee has not yet met. So that is the only time you can actually go in, write a comment, and enter a thumbs up or thumbs down. A bill has to go through both the House and the Senate in order to become law, go to the governor. There are so many hurdles as a bill goes through the process that it's amazing anything gets through. But out of the Melinda may be able to tell you, I think it's around 13 or 1400 bills that have been introduced. Usually only about 300 to 400 get passed. And a lot of those are not controversial. They're just, you know, fairly run of the mill, and they get, you know, bipartisan votes and they whip right through. But I think we're focusing on the ones that we're trying to stop or pass. So there are two places once you go to the legislature's homepage where you can find requests to speak. One is at a drop down right here under legislative information, and one is this panel right here. And also, if you go all the way over to the right, you can see Arizona Capitol Television. You can watch hearings live there, and you can also all the video from all the committee meetings, all the floor sessions, everything back into, you know, whenever video was invented, are housed here on the legislature website. So it's very handy to watch some of these committee meetings. Once you get to request to speak, you sign into your account. We can obviously create an account for you if you don't already have one, because it has to be activated at the Capitol. So we can do that for you. This is the main screen that you will arrive at once you've signed in. And then I show this slide just to tell you that there are two sides to this system. One is request to speak, which is what we're talking about. The other is bill status inquiry, and I'm not going to give a guide to that at this point, but it is a really fascinating rabbit hole that you can go down. You can read all the texts of bills. You can see how many people have RTS for and against a bill. You can see where it is in the process. There's just absolutely a ton of information over on the bill status inquiry side. So once you say, yes, I'm going to request to speak, you look at the left-hand navigation over here and you click new request right here. And once you click new request, this search screen will come up. It says it's a topic search, but I strongly advise you to put a bill number in, not a phrase or a word or anything. Their search function is really pretty bad. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to click any other boxes or select a committee or anything. Just enter the bill number and click search. And after that, down at the bottom, you may have to scroll down a little bit, that bill will appear. You have to verify, yes, that's the bill I was looking for. And then there's a little blue button that looks like this search button, and it says add request, and you would click that. And that takes you to this screen. So this is where you would do your thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you wish to speak? You would probably enter no. And I think it still tells you that there is a remote option, but in fact, there is not. So last year you could testify remotely, but this year they are insisting that COVID does not exist. So they're forcing you to come into committee and speak. So research, who has the time? Where would we be without Melinda and her weekly? I just know we all depend on it. So this is this week's weekly, and Melinda always gives some, you know, sort of an overview and then some major themes, and then goes through day by day, chamber by chamber, and gives the bill summaries, and then recommends to support or oppose. Obviously, you can anybody can make up their own mind. We don't always agree internally, but this is Melinda's publication, so she gets to make the recommendation. And speaking for myself, 99.9% of the time, I do exactly what she recommends, but it's good to know what you're entering your opinion on. So what does it take to stop a bill? It takes a lot of things. RTS is one of them. People are always saying, does RTS work? And my answer is yes and no. Yes, it does, because it shows lawmakers, that there are hundreds and sometimes over 1,000 people who are opposing a bill and only a few lobbyists who are supporting it. However, it is only one tool in the tool chest. We have letters to the editor, we have emails, calls. We can talk about business. We can go to businesses and say, don't support this bill, or ask for their involvement, particularly if they're donors. We can meet with lawmakers. We can give testimony. We can post on social media. There are so many different things we can do. And request to speak is, for us, it's the foundation of all those things. I call it the gateway drug to activism, because it is easy and it gets people engaged, and it points their attention to what's going on at the legislature. So yes, it can work. We can stop bills. And this is a list of just a few of the really, really bad bills that we were able to help stop last year. There are many more than these. I believe I heard that there were 60 voter suppression bills that were introduced last session. Only 3 passed, and they were not the worst. So I'm here to tell you we do have power. And lawmakers also use RTS. They issue their own calls to action. They appreciate what we're doing. Sometimes they read the comments into the record in committees or even on the floor. So everybody is paying attention to request to speak. So there are many things that we recommend to engage with the state legislature. Sign up for a request to speak account, read Melinda's Legislature Weekly, attend our Sunday afternoon happy hour, and I'll put a link to that in the chat in a bit. And this year, we are ramping it up even more, and we are asking people to actually testify in committee. Last year, we noticed there were so many lobbyists and organizations that were testifying, and so few real community voices. So we are working with people to get them to understand that looking the lawmakers in the eye in the committee and telling your story can be a very important thing, a way to use your power. I have done it. This picture over here on the left, I love this picture because this was one of the first committee meetings I attended. And there's Beth Lewis, the co-founder of Save Our Schools, and who I did not know at the time, and we were in the same committee meeting. So this is what we're doing with our testimony program. Civic Engagement is here to help. We help craft talking points, and we keep people away from either ranting or speaking in such a way that they are only preaching to the choir. We really are trying to persuade. We will actually go with you to the Capitol. If you're coming from out of town, if you're coming down from Prescott, you have a bed waiting for you. We can host you overnight. And we have 2 amazing people who are working on this for civic engagement. Laura Tarek, right here, who is our testimony coordinator, and Brandy Reese, who is our first ever media coordinator. So we are really working to get out of our bubble now. This is what Brandy does. Before somebody testifies, she sends an advisory out to the press. And she alerts them to who is going to be testifying. And then she will attend the committee to give moral support, as does Laura or myself or somebody else from our team. If it's your first time testifying, it can be very unnerving. Here's a picture, I love this, of a 14-year-old trans boy who was testifying against this horrendous bill to prohibit trans girls and boys from competing on the sports team that corresponds to their identity. And Brandy really worked hard to make it comfortable for him to testify. And Ron Williams was another one of our people who initially said, no, 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 I can't testify. And once he thought about it, he realized he did have a voice and he did go down and testify. And here are some press availabilities that Brandy arranged for some of our testifiers. Here's Dana Almond, who is actually running for the legislature down in Pinal County. So she has been testifying once a week, actually. She is now a pro, but we helped craft her talking points and we helped her prepare how to give persuasive testimony. So this is the message that I want to leave you with. Do not panic, because we can organize, and really together we can make a big difference. So with that, I will turn it over to Melinda and stop sharing my screen. Are there any questions, or do you want to wait till after Melinda?
Maybe we should wait till after Melinda. If everyone could just write their questions down or in the chat, then we'll have them all for afterward, because maybe there'll be something answered in what Melinda has to say. So let's try that. Welcome, Melinda. Do you need to share your screen?
No, I'm not fancy like Cathy. I'm not a PowerPoint person. I'm made of words, as most of you probably already know. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about this session and what this session looks like. So as I told Cathy earlier today, this legislative session basically comes in 3 parts, unfortunately. And those 3 parts are voting rights attacks, the culture wars, and attacks on public education. And it's all sort of designed to, as red meat, to turn out the partisan base. I think that, I don't know, I haven't really decided, like, do they know, do they see that Arizona is changing, that the demographics of Arizona are changing, and that they are, slowly but steadily and surely losing their iron-fisted grip on Arizona politics, and came within a hair's breadth of losing the partisan trifecta that they've had since, with only one exception, since 1958. Do they recognize that, or do they live in their red bubble to such an extent that they really believe that this is what most of Arizonans think? But either way, what we have is an evaporation of the middle, of the moderate lawmaker, and that has resulted in a whole bunch of extremists that are pushing these partisan attacks. So right now at the legislature, we have 2 weeks roughly before the first bell deadline. So lawmakers only have 2 more batches of committee hearings to see their bill heard in the committees that it was assigned to in its chamber of origin. So if your bill is assigned to House Education and House Appropriations, it has to be heard by those committees by February 16th, or it's dead. So agendas are long, and they are in a frenzy to get their bills heard. So to us as engaged citizens, what we are going to see the next couple weeks is a flurry of activity. And then after those 2 weeks go by, it'll be sort of the chess pieces on the board will be vastly reduced, and we'll be able to actually see the landscape and understand what's moving. But just the next couple of weeks are going to be really frenetic. And we did see this week, yesterday, I believe it was, the what I'm calling the teacher gag bill, the attempt at legislating a ban on critical race theory, which is something that does not exist in Arizona. It's an advanced concept taught in law school. But that passed out of the House along partisan lines and will have a chilling effect on classroom instruction and teacher conversation. And bills like that are the bills that we see moving. So I'm going to take a peek at the chat. How often do the committees refuse to hear a bill? Quite often. So the first big bucket of bills that do not get heard as a rule are the Democratic bills. So as you all know, we have a very tight partisan split, 31 Republicans to 29 Democrats in the House, and 16 Republicans to 14 Democrats in the Senate. But I can count the number of Democratic bills that have passed in any given session on both my hands. So generally fewer than 10. And the vast majority are Republican bills. And the party that is in the majority gets to drive everything. So you guys know this, Karen Fann is Senate president, and she decides committee chairs, and she decides a lot of things, including which bills get heard and get assigned to which committees. So the bills, can also, committee chairs can choose not to hear Republican bills as well. Leadership has a lot to do with that and can assign a bill to more than one committee if they don't like it. Last week, famously, might have been this week, famously, Rusty Bowers assigned an election bill that he did not like to all 12 standing House committees, which was a beautiful moment to see, and I don't think has ever happened in the history of Arizona. But quite often they will decide, committee chairs have a lot of power. They will decide not to hear a bill, and that's the end of it. Water rights, for example. There are a few Republican lawmakers who have been working very hard to secure Arizona's water rights, and they've had to deal with Gail Griffin, the House, the chair of the House committee that supervises water. And they just cannot get around her. So, we have ever more drilling and ever more, failing groundwater protections. What percentage of Arizona voters does the hard right extremist faction comprise? So no more than probably 25 to 30%. But those 25 to 30% of Arizona voters have a monopoly, virtually a monopoly, on what happens at our state house. And that's to do with a lot of things, redistricting and the nature of a partisan primary that you have to run to the right in order to win, and then the district is redistricted in a safe way that it's a 30-point Republican advantage. And so the middle evaporates and you end up with just, totally polarized. Do committees often produce bill memoranda for committee members prior to committee sessions? If so, can the public see those memos prior to testifying? Yes, I love bill summaries. They are wonderful. They are not required to be distributed, but they are produced for the lawmakers. Majority staff produce bill summaries, and you can find those on the bill status inquiry side of Request to Speak system. And you can find those generally 2 business days before a committee hearing. Some of them are better than others. not all staff are good at their jobs, but generally they are very helpful. Minority staff also produce bill summaries, but those are generally internal only. And you will only see them in the rare case that they do what's called a minority report, which is a real thing for very, very controversial bills. Let's see. Are there easier days or times to get on RTS? Yes, RTS has sucked lately, hasn't it? I'm so sorry for all of you who have been using it. The state lawmakers invested, I'm told, about $1 million to improve the system and ended up breaking it instead. And it is running very poorly for them behind the scenes as well. They're having a lot of trouble. But what I have found is if you are an early bird or a night owl, like I love to get on at 6 o'clock in the morning and it runs great. That doesn't work for everybody, but I know some people who get on at 11 o'clock at night. So odd hours work great. Weirdly, it's easier to look things up if you're not logged in. Try opening an incognito window and just like giving the system a fresh start. If all else fails, there is a form where you complain to the webmaster of the request to speak system. And I have been told that they need to hear from as many people as possible so that they understand what a universal issue it is. So Cathy, maybe you can drop that in the chat. And I've done a whole lot of talking. So other questions?
Here's another question, Melinda, please. What are the dates for this year's legislative session?
Yeah, so those are in the preview edition of the Legislature Weekly, which they are all linked at the bottom of the latest weekly. You'll find a list that says previous updates, and you can always go back. And I, in fact, go back and look at that frequently, but it's supposed to be a 100-day session. I'll drop that link in the chat again. Supposed to be a 100-day session, but the first bill deadline is coming right up. It's on February 16th. And then after that, we've got the second bill deadline, which is the middle of March, March 25th. And the 100-day point is April 23rd. But I do not expect the session will end on April 23rd. That's just the magic ending point we all hope for. And unfortunately, as contentious and partisan as a session we've had, I think that we'll be going into late June again this year, if not longer.
Thank you. Here's another question from the chat. What percentage of Arizona voters does the hard right extremist faction comprise?
I think I answered that one, but I guessed 25 to 30%. So I'd love to answer any further questions if anyone has them.
I have a question. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Melinda and Cathy, for being here tonight. You really are superstars for the state legislature. And, the work that you're doing is heroic. And I really want to just thank you for being so dedicated to this because of how convoluted it can be. And I want to reference the last slide in Cathy's presentation, the little image on the wall that said, "Don't panic, organize." I'm not panicking, okay, but it seems to me like in the past decade, the Democrats are really late to the game when it comes to like how important state legislatures are in both our federal government, but also in our local lives. Mm-hmm. And it really seems like the Republicans have really figured that out. And the other part of it is that even when we only have, we're one seat minority, they're still kicking our butts. I mean, that's what it feels like, right? Like what Melinda said, the Democrat bills don't even get heard. They just get shoved right off the table. There's no chance. But we're still that close. And so again, I'm not panicking, but I really don't know what is it that we need to do, given the urgency of the times that we live in, the situation that we are in, being so close, and yet still feeling like we're getting our asses kicked in this legislative session, the last legislative session, people like Wendy Rogers getting elected. How do we, in your opinion, organize for something that it feels like it's really hard to get people to understand the importance of it and recognize what they need to do to participate in making it better?
That is a very good question. Thank you, Jeff. And I agree that it can be incredibly disheartening. Our fundamental job, we call RTS the gateway drug for a reason. Our fundamental job is to help voters connect the names on their ballots with the bad bills that they are passing. And that is, it's work. And it requires conversation with people. So all of you on this call are extremely well educated, and also have, I guess, sort of the misfortune of being in a really red district. But when we came up to visit you several months ago on the drive home, I told Cathy that you all inspire me so much. Out of all of the areas that we visited, you all were my favorite, because nobody organizes like a red district. Like, it is just phenomenal what you all have been able to accomplish, and how hard you all work, and how you don't give up. And so I would just say, keep doing what you're doing, talking to your neighbors, using all the tools that Cathy mentioned on that slide with all the little hexagons on it. And when people come into your area, don't let them tell you, don't let them tell you how to talk to voters or how to organize, because you know your community's best. And then I would also remind you that this is the reason that Indivisible formed, is to push Democrats out of their bubble, out of their comfort zone, and to make actual real change happen. Cathy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I always have something to add. I feel I totally agree with Melinda. Organizing in a red area is challenging, but I feel so inspired by being in Arizona right now, and the last 3 to 4 years, 5 years, I guess, because unlike all of my friends and relatives on the East and West Coast, Arizona really matters now. We are a swing state. And so what we do and our votes are the ones that really make a difference right now. So I actually love organizing in a red state, and Arizona is still pretty red, because it is so inspiring. And when I went to that big Indivisible gathering in Washington, every time I got in the elevator, I would say to whoever was in there, where are you from? And there were people organizing in Oklahoma, in Florida, in Louisiana, in North Dakota, in, every single state. And I found that so incredibly inspiring that, basically, if you don't start, you'll never get there. One of the other sort of truisms that I tell myself all the time is that I feel like I have learned what I need to know about organizing from the anti-abortion movement. Right after abortion was legalized back in the 70s, they started working to overturn it, and look where they are now. So this is what I took from them. Words matter. How you speak and what you say and what words you use make a big difference. Incrementalism works, because you will often get there through small steps, and never give up, because that is what they have done for 40 years now. And, you know, I'm certainly hoping it doesn't take us 40 years to, you know, to accomplish what we would like to in Arizona. But Arizona was one of 3 states in the entire country that picked up an incremental legislative seat in the last cycle. And that is because of you and all the other people who have organized statewide. So we have a ton to be proud of. And, you know, but obviously we still have a lot of work to be done, and we are doing it. So don't give up.
There's another question in the chat. From looking at the for and against on request to speak, it appears that the quote unquote other side is now using request to speak more than previous years. Is that the case?
That is the case, and that does not mean that request to speak is not a valid tool. But it is one of the things that motivated us to get out of our bubble and use other tools as well.
I have a quick follow-up.
Actually, I do want to say, excuse me, Jeff, I do want to say that somebody told me yesterday or the day before that this was the first time that we have outnumbered the gun advocates in request to speak. The first time ever. They are the only group that has been organized for a long time around RTS, and we are finally outnumbering them. And that is fantastic.
Congratulations. I have a quick follow-up for you, Cathy, and thank you for the answer, for your answer there, Melinda. In your presentation, you also, you know, stated that the goal of Civic Engagement Beyond Voting is to get a new legislature, and we are, you know, technically really close to that possibility. And so what I'm wondering is, what can we do specifically to do that in the election in November? Like, which races, you know, we're here in, you know, where it's a much steeper climb, but there are races in Arizona that could be a path to get us there if we wanted to donate or if we wanted to contribute in some way to give us the best chance to flip the legislature and get a new legislature. What does that look like in 2022?
Yeah, there are, what is it, Melinda? I think there are 5 districts that are being closely targeted by basically everybody from the DMV.
Maybe 6, but definitely 5.
Yeah, that are being closely targeted. I think they are 2, 4, 13, 16, and maybe Melinda, you can
9.
They are primarily in the Phoenix area, but one is in Pinal County. So I don't believe there are any considered swing districts up in northern Arizona. But this is really what our accountability teams are doing. And we started this project right after the last session. And it was based on an indivisible project that worked on Mark Kelly's campaign. And what they did was for a solid year, they worked on connecting Martha McSally to destroying healthcare. And by the time she realized that her name was being linked in that way, it was too late for her to change that narrative. So what we have been working on for the last 6 months is starting to lay down narratives about legislators that we would like to get rid of that will allow their campaigns to come in or the opposition, our side's campaigns to come in, build up their candidate at the time we are dragging down the current, the incumbent. So this is very specialized work. It requires a lot of focusing on the negative and the bad rather than the good. I'm going to be putting together another recruitment for that project. I'm working with Tricia Sauer on the date because she's my close partner in it. But what we are doing is working on a whole variety of tools, and our media effort is also feeding into this accountability project by, again, connecting the names of legislators to bad legislation, because that is really where we get a lot of that ballot fall off. You know, people who vote for the top of the ballot and then just don't bother with the rest, or people who voted for Biden and Kelly and then reverted to their party identity when they got down the ballot because they didn't know who those people were. So this is a project that we're going to be working on pretty intensively for the next 8 months or so, focusing in on those swing districts and those legislators that we want to unelect. So that is work that we require a ton of different talents to feed into that work, and would love to have anybody join. Does that help, Jeff?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm assuming that you're going to put name, you name the districts, but of course the names and the campaigns and all of that, folks, if they want to support the Democratic candidate,
yeah,
and obviously amplify the the bad bills associated. Seems like there's a really an abundance of those, so you're not going to have a problem with that. So.
No problem finding the issues to hang around their necks. But what we are doing is focusing on issues that are not divisive. So that takes out some of the bills that people get very steamed about. But we are trying to appeal to people who do not already agree with us. So it is really important to stay on issues and subjects and values that matter to a cross section. Those extremists that are 25 to 30%, we're ignoring them. It's the people in the middle, the independents and people who are not paying attention, the low information voters, those are the people we're focusing on.
So I just put a link in the chat, a poll from the Center for the Future of Arizona. And it shows that despite our deep divisions, Arizonans agree on far more than we disagree on. And these issues that are listed in the poll are things that, good jumping off points, good places for us to start talking to our neighbors, where we may be surprised that that we all have things that we can agree on. We all want clean water and clean air and good roads and strong public schools for our neighborhood kids to go to. And these are things that we all agree on.
Do we have more questions here? Anyone? Okay, I have a weird question. I don't even know if it's reasonable, but like when they put these bills forward and you were talking about the three sort of prongs, like the cultural, tricks to, I forget how you called it, the culture wars, attacks on voting and attacks on education. Do you think the legislators actually explore the real consequences of those bills? Or do you think that's not the point? The point is to get their constituents angry and, do you know what I'm saying? Like to make it something like the real consequences seem like they're never discussed, for example, to me.
I spoke to one of the few moderate lawmakers left down at the Capitol today who said, I was listening to my colleagues debate this bill, this attack on trans kids, and so many of them are only thinking about their kid and not considering the wider ramifications of this bill. And I just wanted to say, I wish you would talk to a trans kid.
Yeah.
Like, I wish that you would get out of your little bubble and consider the effect that your bill is having on the wider world. So
on real people.
Yes.
Real people, right.
And that's why, we often get accused of being in a liberal bubble, but if you look at any major city in the United States, it's incredibly diverse. racial diversity and different languages, different ages, and different education and different nationalities, all of this diversity, whereas deep red communities also often look very homogenous, and I think that those those are the real bubbles, and it can be very difficult to find people that don't already agree with you when you live in a homogenous community.
Yeah, thank you for that. I always wonder if they're disingenuous or really have thought out the consequences of whatever bill they're putting forward.
I have heard them say in caucus, can you explain to me why the Democrats don't like this bill? And it's some like incredibly toxic and divisive subject. And they just seem to truly not get it.
That was that as a segue to what Rosemary was just asking, that was my disconnect. You're talking about the fact that there are so many issues that should or that do bring us together. Yet, why do they get away with introducing so many pieces of legislation, which for the only purpose seems to be divisive? And I'm just befuddled by that, and I don't know how we combat. I don't know.
My husband has this issue with one of the technicians that he works with, who is a Trump Republican, and my husband is a lifelong Democrat. And they, his tech will get going about, voter fraud or this or that issue. And they have agreed to disagree on those issues, but what they, can always come back to, like, he started talking to him about school vouchers, and his tech was like, geez, that's really stupid. Like, I can't believe they're doing that. So there are things that, even when we have, social issues, perhaps that we disagree on, there are always things that we also have in common.
Yeah.
I think what I would also add is that there is a completely different framework of thought that is present in the conservative community. And, I trace a lot of our issues today back to Reagan, frankly, yes, who was the first sort of libertarian, get the government out of my life, started eroding trust in government. And, when you ask, do they understand the consequences of the bills? Those are the consequences they want. It's not, to defund government, to reduce government, to promote personal liberty in a way that really denies that we are in a social compact. But it is a divide that starts it's a very fundamental divide. And you learn that the frame that you put around an event is what affects your perception of that event. So the frame matters more than what actually happened. You come to your life experience with a frame already constructed. And it is a totally different frame than the one I grew up with. So, I just have to learn, how do I talk to people who come with a different frame? So framing messaging is truly an obsession of mine. If you don't go to the movement briefings that are every other Wednesday, it is a masterclass in messaging to appeal to a broad cross-section of people. Very, very interesting. And also the work of George Lakoff, Lakoff. Very, very interesting if you want to think about, why, just spewing facts and talking louder will not convince people that you are right. And so many liberals think if I just say it louder, I'll be able to convince them. And that is just not the way messaging works.
On the other hand, one of the things that connect the dots, the same people that say that they don't want government out of their faces have absolutely no trouble then dictating to communities about plastic bags, about what they, how they spend their money, what they don't do. And so I just, you know, they have a framework about being sort of libertarian, but yet, you know.
Oh, you're absolutely right. But pointing out
we have another question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
We have another.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. We have another question in the chat. Do you think fear, misogyny, homophobia, and racism are what's at work with so many extreme right politicians and their supporters?
Yes.
How many different ways can I say yes? Yes, I do.
Yes, we think that too.
And I think at the root of all of that is fear.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's a fear of change, I think. Like, you know, if you've always been the top dog, so to speak, in your whatever your social identity is, you really want to be the top dog. But then the odd thing about that is change is the only constant we have, right?
Yes.
Things always change. So
a couple things to say about that. There's a saying, when you've lived your whole life with privilege, equality looks like oppression.
Absolutely.
And then if anyone here who's a science fiction fan, if you've read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, and one of the themes of that is change, and in fact, change as a deity, and highly recommend.
Thank you for that.
Here's another question from the chat. How are the legislators benefiting from breaking our school systems?
You want to take this one, Cathy?
Yeah, we could go on about this for a long, long time. I say it is three things. It's greed, money, capitalism, or just greed, God, religious fundamentalism, and basic libertarian philosophy. So this is sort of an unholy alliance between the Koch brothers philosophy, which is libertarian. There should be no public education. They want to eliminate public education and in fact, all public services or all restraints on corporations. The second, you know, if you look at the DeVos stream, it's religion, religious fundamentalism. They think all schools should be religious schools. So they want to eliminate public education in order to institute only private religious education. And the third, libertarian, they just don't believe in government as a source of common good. So it's sort of an unholy alliance among all those three groups. And this sort of libertarianism used to be very fringe back in the 40s, 30s, you know, the John Birch Society, which the Kochs were part of. And it is no longer fringe. And I think, again, Ronald Reagan was sort of the conduit for bringing that into the mainstream culture. I just attended a webinar today with Nancy McLean, who wrote the book Democracy in Chains, which Melinda recommended her book. I will recommend Democracy in Chains because it connected so many dots. That was such a huge question for me. I've never questioned public education. Why would anybody want to destroy that? But in fact, that book will connect all those dots for you.
Okay, now we have two more questions that I think we're going to finish on. The first one is, are they, I think that meaning the legislators, happy to give up Medicare, Social Security, and disability?
That was my question. And what I was talking about is the libertarians that want the schools destroyed, Anyway.
Yeah, and the answer is yes, they would be glad to give that up. They believe that you are responsible for yourself. You're not responsible for your neighbor. And they see all of those social benefits as handouts to the undeserving. So,
but not all of them. So my aunt, for example, another Trump Republican, was railing against high taxes one day. And I said, well, but Judy, I actually don't mind paying taxes because I know that they go to things like good roads and public libraries. And, when I was overseas in India, they don't have public libraries and the streets are crowded. And there was an ambulance on the street that couldn't get its patient to the hospital because the streets were in such disrepair. And, those are the things that my taxes pay for. And she was like, oh, well, I guess I don't mind those things. Like you have to find a way to bridge that divide, and it can be hard.
Yeah, and that's why we don't talk about tax cuts. We talk about revenue and benefit cuts. So because everybody wants lower taxes. I mean, so do I, but I think we actually do want the things that those taxes pay for.
I think we do too. It's also, I think it's also odd that the idea is that the public schools, healthcare, all should be profitable, right? I know Betsy DeVos said something like it's the public school system is never gonna, it's never gonna make a profit. And I thought, well, correct. It is never going to make a profit because that's not what it's here for. Yeah. And I think there's kind of something twisted that it's not worth it if you don't make money off it.
Right. It's the difference in philosophy versus, a capitalist structure versus a public good. And turning our public schools into a capitalist structure means that there are winners and losers. And I don't want any of our kids to be losers.
Absolutely not. Wow.
Okay, we're going to close with this question, and I see that there's a response to it, but I wanted to stress it. Do you need contributions to continue your work? And if people would check out the chat, there's a link for contributions to contributions you can make. So it'd be great if you could check that out.
Yeah.
You're muted,
Thank
Cathy.
you so much. I really, that is a great question, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well,
I want to reiterate that you're all wonderful.
Yeah. Well, we think you are, and we can't thank you enough for taking the time, to come and talk to us, because we are all the way up here in Prescott, and not everything's happening down there, but a lot is happening down there. And we're really so grateful the amount of work you all do is unbelievable. And
we love to coordinate with groups all over the state. We consider ourselves a force multiplier as well. We love to collaborate in any way. So if there's anything we can ever do, please reach out. And I also want to give a shout out to Jeff for giving me some great social media training. I've more than doubled my followers since I talked to Jeff a few months ago. So I really appreciate it.
That's excellent. Okay, thank you so much, you two. We're very, very grateful. And the rest of the meeting is sort of reports from different teams and projects that we have going on. You're more than welcome to stay and hear what Prescott Indivisible's up to, or we understand if you have to go. So thanks so much.